welcome guys to another episode of Queer Confab. Today we are going to be discussing free speech versus hate speech. What is the line? What is the difference between them? We're going to explore how free speech empowers and how hate speech can harm, and the legal lines between them. But before we get into that, we're going to introduce you to our guests for this evening. So Lisa, if you want to start, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us about a time where you utilized your free speech.
Okay, so hi, I'm Lisa Marie Ferguson. I am a singer in Aberdeen, and I have utilized my right to free speech a lot. I as a female, I find myself in situations where I have to shout and make myself known and heard quite a lot. And sometimes that comes with um difficulties in using my free speech, sorry. But I also create community music projects in which women can use their voices as well and utilize their right to free speech as well.
Perfect. Ankit, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So my name is Ankit Madhira. I'm an actor and a singer, but one of the times that I use free speech that comes to mind, like off the top of my head, was on campus with a university protest for DACA back in the States. And they were trying to defund the program, and we were like, that's not a good idea. So yeah.
Perfect. Alexandra?
Yes, hi, I'm Alexandra from New York. A time that I honestly am a bit sheepish shy when it comes to talking, so I'd say my freedom of speech is found more in my writing. I like to utilize my writing skills to spread the word in a comical, funny, digestible way. Um, yeah, so I think every time that I make art, it's allows for people who have similar opinions to be like, hey, I also feel that way, and I'd like to create a community. And, yeah.
Perfect. And I utilize my free speech whenever a guy annoys me in a bar. Uh, and protest too when the need arises. So if you guys have any questions or any thoughts, sound off in the comments. I will be keeping an eye on them. But apart from that, we're going to get started. So first of all, we're going to, in our own terms, define what free speech and what hate speech are. So since we started with you last time, Lisa, Alexandra, I'd like to go to you first. What are your definitions of free speech and hate speech?
So I think free speech is, well, firstly, we all have anyone who can express themselves, can freely speak. But I think the distinction between speech and free speech is that there are protections by a governing body to allow that person to feel somewhat safe in saying what they feel. And then I think with hate speech, it's saying how you feel, but also encouraging violence of some sort.
Perfect. Ankit?
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. I would say that free speech, like Alexandra said, you can say what you want, and you shouldn't have the fear of like backlash or something happening to you by voicing your opinion. But at the same time, if your opinion is putting others at harm or telling, kind of like saying like, hey, like, attack this group of people or whatever the situation may be, that's where it turns into hate speech.
Lisa?
So yeah, I do agree with you guys that it is kind of the act of you can kind of say what you want, but I kind of feel that it's more there's a fine line between, well, not necessarily there's a fine line between saying what you want and kind of hate speech. It's more that if your speech has a negative impact on somebody, or if words are used in like a malicious or kind of, as you were saying, like a kind of a way to kind of hurt and chastise people, then this, yes, that is the definition, like kind of the difference between that I would say between free speech and hate speech is, yep, you can absolutely have your own opinion. Everybody is entitled and has the right to their own opinion. But when that opinion starts to affect somebody negatively or has a negative impact or a painful impact on that person, then I think it becomes hate speech.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I think that a lot of times people struggle with the line that there is between free speech and hate speech, especially nowadays, and especially with things like social media. And that's things we're going to discuss later on in the podcast. But with actual definitions that I have found, which I have just gone. So the United Nations wrote a little blog, Hate Speech versus Freedom of Speech, which states the need to preserve freedom of expression from censorship by states or private corporations is often invoked to counter efforts to regulate hateful expression, in particular online. Freedom of opinion and expressions are indeed cornerstones of human rights and pillars of free and democratic societies. These freedoms support other fundamental rights, such as to peaceful assembly, to participate in public affairs, and to freedom of religion. It is undeniable that digital media, including social media, have bolstered the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas. Therefore, legislative efforts to regulate free expression unsurprisingly raise concerns that attempts to curb hate speech may silence dissent and opposition. So that's a lot of words to say. Freedom of speech is a right. Hate speech is when you try to impose on that right through not so nice speech. So obviously, a lot of people have faced hate speech in their time, especially marginalized communities. And in particular, because it's Pride Month, we're going to be discussing the LGBTQIA plus community. So is there a way that you can provide some historical context on how free speech may have impacted the LGBTQIA plus community, both positively and negatively? Ankit, I'm going to start with you for that one, since we haven't started with you yet.
Yeah, I don't have any like specific examples per se, but I know like in New York there were the Stonewall riots. I think it's the 70s if I have my history correct. But like I do know a little bit about them, and that it pretty much instigated and like escalated because of the hate speech that was being said. And I don't know what was said exactly, but like I know that it was escalated because of that, and that's what actually turned it into a riot. Like at first it wasn't at that level. So like I know that's a situation where like, oh, like, things took a bad turn and it really affected the community in a negative way. I don't have an example for a positive way. If anyone else does, I'd love to learn.
Alexandra, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. No, I want to repeat it again. I'm like, wait, does it have to be something personal or something that we like see? But I immediately think from my perspective as a Jamaican American person. So my family's from Jamaica, and the it can be very dangerous to express yourself openly. And so I know that the negative of it. It was interesting what you were saying before, Lisa, about hate speech being something that can negatively impact someone. Because the argument from people who are homophobic, at least from Jamaican perspective, is that it is a negative impact to allow people to like influence the public, to let them know that it's okay to be queer. Like you shouldn't let people know that it's okay to be queer, and that negatively impacts and their sensibilities. And so it's interesting about what we have to get into definitions of every single word we use when we're speaking. So it's not just about free speech, but it's about clarity of speech, of understanding what do we mean by a negative impact, what do we mean by a positive impact. How much weight do we put on people's feelings? People from homophobic people who are queer, people of all different backgrounds and ideas kind of have we all agree that I want my feelings to be protected. And so it's really interesting how we place that importance on our feelings, but maybe not somebody else's. So I feel like, although I don't have a specific thing of how it's different, when it's positive and negative, I would argue that it could be twofold. It can be positive and negative at the same time, depending on who you're asking.
It's super subjective. Yeah. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree with Alexandra, and you're right, Zoe. It is completely subjective, especially depending on like your culture, like you were saying, your culture, your race, your kind of, your upbringing, like your kind of role in society and things like that, your sexual orientation, but and you're right, the power that we put on words is the important part, and I think that is something that gets lost in translation a lot. Like what is a positive impact, what is negative, you're absolutely right. And I think because even words like slurs and things have, and if you and like how do you claim them back, and does that then mean that that hate speech is no longer a hate speech because you've claimed it back to use for yourself? Sorry, I'm going to get all of the letters wrong, and please don't take it offensively. I'm dyslexic and I can't remember them in order. But within the uh, help me out, Zoe.
LGBTQIA
LGBT,
plus.
thank you so much. Like every single one of them has had to kind of fight for the recognition and for those rights. I don't really want to say my age, but I'm 36. And my parents are of the generation in which this country, it was illegal to be homosexual and to be gay. And that is something that when that law changed as well, it has such an impact on that generation because you're told something is wrong by the government or by the governing body for it to then be not. It doesn't matter about, for some people, I am not generalizing here, this is just the way that I have perceived it, that if you have kind of grown up with that, that is still very much there, even if you don't believe it, and even if you believe that these people, like the queer rights and things like that, and which I do very much fundamentally agree with, by the way. Just the way that I'm kind of talking here is just making sure. But it is, it does matter about these things as well, and then taking those slur words back, and then whether they do impact positively or negatively. Because even if something has still been taken back, it can still impact negatively, even if it has a positive outcome. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. That kind
Yes.
of speaks to what I was saying before about it can be positive and negative at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Because obviously the queer community has used their freedom of speech to progress their rights and things, but they've had such backlash and such hatred and negative, they've tried to claw that hate word back for it to be a positive. So yeah, totally, I completely agree. It is such a mind kind of wobble and net, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, 100%. There, freedom of speech can impact most, if not all, marginalized communities and communities positively and negatively. Like women would have never been able to get the right to vote if it wasn't for the fact that they were utilizing freedom of speech that they didn't actually have at the time because they were women. Or going against the grain, and realistically, because they didn't have that freedom of speech, would that have then been classified at the time as hate speech? It depends on the classification and where it is in the law at the time. So those were really interesting perspective, guys. Thank you so much. Something that I'm quite excited to actually discuss is the sort of distinctions on free speech and hate speech in different countries. If anyone's listening and can pick up that there are a couple different accents going on here, meaning that we are from different places. Lisa and I are from the same place. We're in Aberdeen, Scotland. But Ankit and Alexandra are both originally a US citizen. Yes, perfect. I didn't want to be like, and then someone's like, no, I'm Canadian. And I'm like, I don't know the difference. Well, I do, but I don't know the difference.
It's okay. I mean, people get it confused a lot. I mean, we're different, but like, fair.
Ryan Reynolds sounds American to me, but he's Canadian. So yes, I'm gonna start with you, Lisa. Ankit, I'm gonna come to you last because you were recently in the UK and now are transitioning back to the US. And Alexandra, you have also spent some time in the UK. And are now back in the US. So you guys, I'm really interested to hear your perspectives on this because you've been in both ponds living. So Lisa, how do you feel like there's a contrast between the US and the UK when it comes to the importance of freedom of speech?
Yeah, so I've never been across the pond. I obviously watch kind of the media and things like that. I don't know everything and things. But yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because in the UK, there was this kind of dark underbelly. I know that sounds kind of weird, but there is this kind of like, you have your freedom of speech, but it's so hard to kind of form words in that one. But yeah, in the US, it seems more kind of like open and
It's more spoken about. It's
loud.
more like,
It's more
yeah,
loud. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's not the British way, if that
yeah,
makes sense. There
yeah.
we go. That's how I'm going to describe it. So
Mm.
you, it seems more kind of like passionate and shiny and new and just being like, we will fight for our rights kind of thing. And it's great. And I absolutely am always inspired by kind of like the protests and things like that. And it is wonderful because I am very much an advocate for people's rights and for freedom and things like that. And in the UK, we are kind of still, there is still a little bit of, oh no, no, we can't talk about, we just keep it behind closed doors because we are a bit top of our own proper. And it's slightly different in Scotland, I would say, than it is to kind of like, but we are kind of progressing more and more and more people, and especially with the utilization of like social media and things like that, there are more and more opinions and kind of free speech coming out. But there is that kind of that difference between it being kind of like more energetic, I guess, than I would say the UK based. But again, I only have experience from what I've seen on social media and things like
Yeah,
that, you know.
and through the
So
media, and I feel like Scotland, when it comes to free speech, we utilize our free speech in the way to say anything or anyone going against the government, fuck the government.
yeah,
And that's
absolutely. Fuck, yeah, absolutely.
that's the
I
only time
think
we care.
the only yeah,
Yeah,
actually you make
fuck the
there's a
Tories.
very well yeah, right there. I was gonna say there's a very well known phrase in Scotland which is fuck the Tories
Yeah,
because they are absolutely rubbish and kind of things like that. And Scotland have a very passionate feeling about that one, just like most Americans do over Trump. And I am so sorry that you guys are having to go through that again. And that's the thing, like watching all of that unfold again and the freedom of speech and the don't get me wrong, there's not a lot of smart people. Sometimes some people have the voices that maybe not making the smartest choices in the world, but it's kind of like, yeah, yeah. The only time that Scotland really get passionate is like politics, and there's normally a lot of swear words involved.
absolutely, and 100% true. I completely agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I feel like we don't. I feel like it's more of a new thing. Obviously it's not a new thing to like take your freedom of speech, but it's a new thing for like for us to be seeing the protests the way that they happen in America. Like we don't see them at the same level. Because it's like when it does happen, we're like, people are blocking the roads and stuff, and we're like, oh, for fuck's sake, come on. Whereas I feel like there's more passion and more people get involved in America, and there's a more of a sense of like familial connection through events or communities than there is here. Not to say that there isn't, but I just feel like there's always seems to be more passion with it in America. But Alexandra, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, historically, that is the branding of America. I mean, like, the Boston Tea Party, throw the tea out, like we're like F you guys. So yeah, I would actually absolutely agree with that. When I was in school in the UK, I did notice how American I was. Because I'm usually like as a person, most people who meet me, it's like, oh, you're kind of quiet, like you can speak up a little more, or they're like, oh, you're kind of awkward. But in England, when I was upset about certain things, they're like, wow, you're so loud. There's also the thing of me being a Black woman, so there's like the stigma of that. But yeah, I definitely noticed the difference in how you were talking about the underbelly. I think there's like I've noticed in England, I don't know, I can't necessarily speak for Scotland, but in England, there's this saying things but not saying the actual thing. This indirectness. So then it's harder to protest things that aren't being actually said. How can I fight you if you won't even acknowledge there's a fight to be had? So that's how I feel about the UK versus the US. Like, I'm telling you to your freaking face, I don't like you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can combat that because it was told me to my face. And that was extremely frustrating. I actually remember thinking, oh wow, I really prefer America because I can just say the thing and we can just get it out of the way. Not to say that there isn't certain indirectness in America as well. There are certain things like certain laws that are kind of indirect in terms of like, oh, we're not saying Black people can't live here. It just so happens that all of you over here, we're going to redline and we're going to add obstacles. So like you can live here if you can get over these obstacles. So in that way, it's indirect in our laws, but in terms of our actual speech to each other and on social media, it's very, in your face.
Yeah, England is very passive aggressive. Like
Scotland to an extent, we're just more aggressive with the passive aggressive.
Yeah, it's more aggression. Sorry, my cat just said to me. But yeah, the barriers, the invisible
systemic
barriers.
racism.
Oh yeah,
Systemic
it's so
racism.
deep and it's ridiculous. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, Ankit, what do you have to add on these points?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like you touched on the two big things where America is a lot more in your face, like we're gonna yell at you kind of deal, whereas the UK isn't. And like, you know, I see the advantages of both. Like Alexandra was saying, like it is nice sometimes, especially like, you know, we're human, we mess up. And it's just like, all right, like at least like 90% of the time, if you're in the US and you fuck up, someone's just gonna be like, oi, this is what you did. Don't fucking do it again. Right. Whereas in the UK, they'll just be like, stop talking to you or something. And you're just like, what did I do? You're trying to figure out what I did. And they're like, you should know what you did. And I'm like, I don't fucking know. This is why I'm asking. So like, it's annoying in both ways. But then like, actually right now I'm in India. And so India is an interesting one because they have free speech, but not really. Like in
The
2020,
illusion of free speech.
oh, it's an illusion. Like out of 180 countries in 2023, the world press freedom, India ranked 161 in free speech. So like it's there, but then also like, and a lot of the free speech there is like against the government. So like if you're trying to say something bad about the government, it's like, all right, goodbye. Um, and so like I don't necessarily hear as much out here, but like culturally, we still hear it. Like people are still treated with respect in day-to-day life, but then like, you know, you also have it just quietly said around. It's like, oh yeah, like, you know, avoid this area because it's full of these types of people, like avoid this area, it's full of these types of people. So like the social stigmas are still very much embedded into the nation and into the culture. So it's interesting. It's like a weird dichotomy, and like kind of between the three countries there are pros and cons of each. But I don't know, personally, like Alexandra, I prefer just if someone fucked up, tell them to their face so that they know not to do it again. If they do it again, then by all means, like you don't have to ever speak to that person again. But like at least give them the chance to remedy, which I don't feel is necessarily the case in the UK. Like in the UK, they expect you to know what you did wrong before you're ever told what you did wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Since we were speaking about the illusion of free speech, Alexandra, we were kind of discussing something earlier.
I'm just saying, thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, I remember. Don't worry. Do you want to lean more into that?
Yes, because I think the U.S. also has that problem actually, that we're just recently finding out from the reaction to protests at colleges and how they're putting police to physically attack these kids. It's a bit of an illusion in America as well. We're kind of selling a brand. In general, America, I think our best export is media. Like we're really good at branding things and branding ourselves. And I think we brand ourselves as the leaders of freedom and free speech. And yet, like I was saying before about the laws, so in person or on social media, we'll say what we feel, Americans, but then we have these things where like the government will pass a bill, for example, banning TikTok, and they won't say it like they'll put it in the middle of another bill. So there's all these like sneaky things going on behind the scenes, and so that's where I feel like we really bolster the idea of free speech as a branding strategy, but not as an action.
Yeah, because what was it I said? The freedoms that America seem to have are only freedoms for those who have the power to enforce it. I think that's how I put it. No one come after me, please, FBI, CIA. Like,
But it's the same here as well, Zoe, though, isn't it? Like, but
yeah.
it's also like you were saying, it's the misdirection. Look over here, so you're not looking here.
It just
You
reminds me
know?
of Jada in RuPaul's Drag Race. Look over there. No one here has seen that. Tom, back me up in the
No,
comments,
no,
please.
I've seen bits. It's fine. But yeah, it
I've
is though.
seen 2 episodes and they were at Tom's house.
Fair, yeah.
Why I'm not surprised.
Sorry, Lisa.
But anyway, yeah, no. So it is. It's the misdirection thing. It's that we're gonna give you all the rights and we're gonna give you the free speech, but you're not gonna look at what we're doing over here because we're too busy being shiny in your face and giving you all the things that you want. Whilst, like you're saying, we're gonna enforce this law that you're not sure. Like for example, the new hate law in this country. The way that it was kind of passed was like, oh, but it's going to be this, and it's actually incredibly confusing, and there's lots of things in there that mean things like rights to protest and things. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the kind
They
of,
slowly like look at things and they pick out certain things hoping
yeah,
nobody notices. And
but
they're
it's
like,
all
we're just gonna take that. It's like
just make sure,
the
yeah,
Monopoly cheaters version, when they try to slide the money
slide it
off,
under.
or they
Yeah,
try to take someone off the table without you noticing. You're like, wait a fucking minute.
yeah.
What's
But
going on here?
you also made the good point though, like that it's the people in the power that make these laws, but the people in the power have no idea what it is like anymore because they have now reached a status of privilege, of power, and of wealth that they are no longer aware of what it's like on the lower rungs or within the minorities and there's such a disjoint in it as well that it it does kind of make your voice get lost among the masses kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Does anyone have anything else to add on that little bit? No? No? Alexandra, you look like you were like, aha.
I have a thought, but it's not necessarily connected. It's more just that I wanted to say, this conversation makes me think of, it's not just free speech versus hate speech. It's free speech that makes an impact versus hate speech and hate speech that also makes an impact. I think
Yeah.
the governments allow for certain amounts of free speech, certain amounts of hate speech, but it's the ones that actually make an impact that get people riled up. Those are the conversations that are dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the ones, the rallies and stuff that you do see on television and in the news, that one person has something to say and then that one person agrees and then another person, and then all of a sudden it's the domino effect, and that's when it becomes dangerous. On that note, actually, we should talk a little bit about the role that social media plays into that. So how has the rise of social media influenced the spread of both supportive and harmful speech towards the LGBTQ plus community? Lisa, we'll start with you this time. I'm just looking around my screen and I'm just like, that
Thanks.
one, you'll do.
Thanks very much. You'll do. You're first for the fire. In you go. So yeah, no, actually, I actually have quite a few opinions on social media. Here we go. Are you ready? No. So it is good and it's bad. It's great for the fact that we now have global mass communication. Brilliant. Fantastic for sharing things like education and medical resources and information and things like that. But it also provides a shield for the trolls and for the homophobes and for the racists and everybody like that because they're on a screen. There is not that personal interaction anymore. You cannot see the impact that your words are having on this person. So you will type what you think and what you feel. And there is nobody to regulate that. And there's nobody standing behind you going, you cannot say that because that is just wrong, you know? So it's a good thing and a bad thing. And the thing is, where do you then step in to regulate free speech? Because technically, social media, that's why it's so popular, is because you have the right to free speech on it. Unless you are breaking rules of a group that have specifically said no swearing, no none of this, none of this, none of this. But even then, that's things like admins. And that's only on certain platforms. On other platforms, you can say and post whatever you like because free speech. And if you have a laptop, you can absolutely go for it. So
Unless Elon Musk decides he doesn't want you on X.
Yes, well, that is a whole other conversation about a crazy man with a
Yeah,
crazy amount of money who should not be allowed to spend any of that crazy amount. Anyway,
we don't have time for
that's
that.
a different podcast, Zoe.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. That's the point. If we have people like Elon Musk coming in buying platforms as well, that then also encourages hate speech and trolls. I mean, how much hate speech has he got because everybody thinks he's a crazy man? You know, myself included. But I might be wrong. He might just be like trying to live his life, And that's the thing. We are so disconnected from the personal part of it that you don't necessarily see the impact that your words have on social media or through any of those kind of platforms and things. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Bye.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to kind of put the veil up when
Yeah,
you're not seeing the true impact like right
yeah.
in front of your face. It's like watching a car accident on TV and then seeing it happen
In
in
real
real life.
life,
Like,
yeah,
even if it's
yeah.
a real one, like on the police
Yeah, you're still
stuff.
you're still a step back from it.
Yeah,
But it's also the same for like the influencers as well. You're a step back from reality, meaning that you can be your true authentic self.
mhm.
So, it is there's like everything, the spectrum is massive. You can go from the darkest, horriblest comments to the most empowered, fantastic performances because social media gives you the right and opportunity to do so.
Alexandra, what do you have to add to that?
Well, my first thought is the joy that I feel from social media and actually being in a community that does not that reacts very unwell to queer people. Social media feels like a safe place to exist authentically, and I appreciate. I think about it a lot actually. How much I appreciate technology and the advances we've made, because people who were born in the early 1900s who were queer didn't have that opportunity to find like a safe space and to build a community where you feel not alone and you can quiet the dark thoughts. But there are also dark thoughts on the web. There are also dark thoughts on the web, and I think it comes to like this bigger thing that will always be a thing, good versus evil. We will use any platform, any tool to further our agenda, us being anyone. So I feel like social media is just another tool of many tools where it's like I can use this knife to cut up some vegetables to feed myself, or I can use this knife to stab someone. It's really like I think the question is, how are we teaching our society about empathy? How do we maintain our empathy while being veiled? And I don't know.
Fair enough. Ankit?
Yeah, I mean, other than the main points which Lisa and Alexandra already touched on, Alexandra, you were mentioning empathy. I feel like with social media, it's helped the LGBT plus community because, like, at least in general, like, I see a lot more empathy for them because it's like a lot of times, and until social media, a lot of people didn't necessarily know of things that had happened in the past, things that are still currently happening, the difficulties that people are facing. But it's like now, even if they can't connect to it per se, because it's not part of them or part of their culture or something that they have to deal with, they're like, they can look at it and as a human being be like, well, that's not right. Like, that's not okay. So I do think like it's very good for that. And like you said, it's very good for building communities and finding a safe space. Like whoever is listening, like whatever community you want to be a part of, I'm sure that you can find one on social media. You might have to do a little bit of digging, but like I guarantee you it exists. So like you can find a safe community for yourself. And so I think like at this point, like you're never truly just completely facing something on your own. You can find someone out there. And I think that's the beautiful thing about social media. The dark side is the dark side of, internet trolls and everything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the positives can also like kind of leak into the negatives as well, because yes, we can find our safe communities, but then those who are very much for hate speech and those who are possibly Andrew Tate followers, etc.
Make America great. Sorry.
Yeah, I also find their communities as well, which then gets them riled up and then begins, it can go either way, it's social media is one of the best and the worst inventions that has ever play. But I mean, it's a part of everyday life now. There's no way we're ever going to be able to exist without social media. So it's kind of a thing where we're just going to have to deal with it. And, people will continue to utilize social media to talk about things, which is great. It's great to have open dialogue. It's exactly what we're doing right now, is having an open dialogue about a topic, but there is also the more dangerous side of it. But that's part and parcel with most things nowadays. What role do you think that, on you go, Alexandra.
I just thought of also, because you're saying positive leading into the negative, negative kind of bleeding into the positive. I think we get to find who these people are that hate. I actually want people to say that they hate me so I can know who I have to avoid.
It gives you a clear path of
that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, it does kind of make you go, oh, okay, so you're not the nice person that I actually thought you were, because you've just said this on here, even though you're friends with me on my profile, but I've seen what you said over here. So absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I had a guy that I'd known for years, and he shared like an Andrew Tate thing on one of his stories, and I literally messaged him. I was like, what the fuck are you playing at? He's like, oh, well, he has some good points sometimes. I'm like, yeah, he's also a serial offender of multiple things, but whatever.
I'd have just unfriended him straight away. I'd have been like, nope, no chance, goodbye.
I've not spoken to him since.
Good.
But anyway,
see ya.
Yeah, so what role do you think that these social media platforms should have in regulating and moderating hate speech? Do you think that they have an obligation to do that, or is it just it's social media, so deal with it? Anyone jump in. Anyone feel free to jump in.
Okay, go on then. I'll jump in first. So, okay. Of course, you're like, I knew she was an opinionated person. So yeah, that's the big question, though, isn't it, Zoe? That's the big question since this stuff has started from the night now. Again, back to the old age. I remember good old MSN and all of those things.
Bebo.
This is kind of Bebo. Love a bit of Bebo on MySpace. Oh God, I'm so old. Anyway, that's the thing, like they've been trying to do from the start, is how do you regulate free speech? How do you regulate it enough that the hate speech and the hate crimes don't come in? That it is free speech, but it's positive. But by doing that, you will take away. You're putting a law on free speech. Then that you're putting on that you cannot have. You're no longer able to have your full thoughts. You can only have your measured thoughts, and even then, we're still going to regulate it. That's the thing. Like we were just saying, social media is a massive blessing to isolated, to marginalized communities, to so many people, and there is always going to be that dark side. And like you're saying, Alexandra, it is about navigating the people that you interact with on these platforms and things. But at the same time, should there be a regulate? Because obviously, there's so many conversations and things had on social media that shouldn't happen between people either offending you or kind of like, targeting you. That's the words I was looking for. They're targeting you with their hate speech. And the thing is, like, yes, it is horrible, and yes, we should not allow that to happen. But again, that takes away from their rights to free speech. It is so tricky. But please, somebody else join in.
It's like the Wild Wild West online.
That's a good film. Love Will Smith.
Never seen it.
Oh, either have I just said it because I
No, it's actually a really good film. You're not wrong. It's a good film. The song was absolutely amazing. Alexandra, please continue.
I remember the song, but I didn't watch the movie, and but thank you for reminding me, because it's one of those movies that I was like, I need to watch someday, and then just someday hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
But,
okay, you can watch it for your podcast if you're still doing that one. We'll plug it later.
But yeah, the point that I was going to say was, I think back to I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, and we had a very unfortunate situation where someone used social media to post to out someone, and it led to their death. So like, but no one would have guessed that that you could do that. You know what I mean? That was like one of the first times someone did that, because yeah, like the Facebook was new. That's when people really on Facebook and stuff, and um it's I don't mean to bring it down or to things, but just to say that, just to point out the part of there, you didn't know what you could do harm wise then, and we still don't know what people could do, because the possibilities are endless of the great and terrible things that we can do with social media. So I think it's a continuous conversation we're always going to be having to have, because technology is speeding up so quickly. Like again, I'm always shocked. Like I'll wake up every day. Every day I'm shocked by something my phone does. So there's always a new feature. I forget that phones can be used for like call. Yeah, people are afraid to have phone calls, but that's what a phone is for.
No, it's not. A phone is for texting and WhatsApping. What are
Joey,
you
I
on
hate to
about?
tell you, the original use of a phone is to phone
Nope.
people.
Don't
You know,
accept it. Ankit, what did you have to add? Because I know you died
Yeah.
actor as well.
Oh, no, you're good. I mean, I think like we've been saying, it's kind of a slippery slope, because also sometimes, like Alexandra just pointed out, like it's not always night and day what is hate speech and what isn't, right? And how it'll affect someone. So something that can still very much be said, and 95% of the people who read it, or even 99% of the people who read it, won't see it as hate speech, but then 1% will, and then it'll affect someone. So like, it's always just a conversation. I think there are rules, and there are certain things where it's like, you can't outwardly be like, hey, like we should go attack this group. Like, I think social media has the right to like, block those things and kick those people out and things like that. But then it's kind of a weird dichotomy, because like we've been saying, I don't think there's any like right or wrong answer for that one.
Mm-hmm. I think it. Oh, sorry. On you go, Alexandra. All I was gonna say is I think it's because I do think like I think it's good to have some regulation, to have some monitoring of these things.
yeah.
But also sometimes they pick up things, and when you tell them that I was just calling my friend a dirty slut, I wasn't actually calling someone else a dirty slut. Like, why? Don't give me in trouble for that,
like
please.
I insult my best friends so badly on social media, like I'm the worst to them, but they know I'm joking, but somebody else will read that differently,
Like, I mean, social media is interesting, because like I had a post that got flagged for like, bad content, and it's like I was describing a scene in a movie, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not, all I'm doing is literally saying like, so this is what happens, and then it got flagged. So it's like, it's that weird thing where it's like, I don't know why some things get flagged sometimes, but yeah.
Just on Alexandra's point, I've lost whose point it was, but it was about I know it was Alexandra's point, because it was somebody that got outed. That's what it was. Is how do you not only regulate that, but how do you punish that? If that, like, is it punishable as well? Like, where's the justice in that? And do we have the right to have justice in that? Does the person who got outed have the justice? And is it the person that outed them? Or, it's just to add to the kind of regulatory part of it. Even if we could regulate it, how would we chastise it? Just by taking them off social media for 72 hours? That's not really a punishment, is it? Or that's not really justice, not necessarily the punishment is what, because it should be about the justice, not necessarily about the punishment.
Or that space where it's also about who is deciding how to regulate and how to punish. Because right now what we're saying is AI is making these not arbitrary, very strict decisions that everyone who's a slut is an actual slut, but it's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely agree, and that's the thing
We
with
are all
AI
sluts.
as well.
We are.
I earned that badge, thank you so much. But anyway,
I worked hard for that.
I worked hard for it. It took a lot of graft, but no, you make a good point again, though. It's the AI that's in charge of these cutthroat kind of this is bad, this is good, and even the advances in that are kind of terrifying and scary. And if that does become the regulatory body, how do we control that? Do we control that? You know,
Yeah, how do we differentiate? How does that pick up context and tone, and who was the person who was speaking to? You know, like, was that person speaking to their friends? Because realistically nowadays, if you have a friendship and you're not insulting each other, is it really a friendship?
right? I mean, I
Like
insulted you
100%.
on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. You bully me all the time. But yeah,
Watch out, this is gonna get flagged.
we get taken off a live stream straight away.
So
But yeah, no, that was a really interesting conversation, guys. So we've kind of talked about like the fine line. What is the fine line between freedom of speech and hate speech? So how do we balance that out? How can we balance the right to free speech with the need to protect marginalized communities from hate speech? Someone just jump in. I'll stop doing the whole picking and choosing. Whoever speaks first.
go for it, Alexandra. You go for it.
I watched this really interesting TikTok the other day talking about safe spaces, and this man was talking about how this black man was grappling with his disadvantage as a black person, but his privilege as a man, and how someone told him that men need to create a safe space for women, and then he's like, "But how would?" He thinks that's impossible because he's like, how as a man would I even know what a safe space is for, like, as like how a woman feels? And so I think no matter what, it's up to the community themselves to say, like, hey, this is what I decide is a safe space. Like, we have to come together to agree LGBTQ plus that what we are accepting, what we're rejecting, and also what we're open to reevaluating. Because I think it's just constant reevaluation, constant communication. We're such a constantly in communication with each other about like standing together and letting people know, like, we will not tolerate this. Because sometimes I just want to say, people will be saying things about bisexual people, and it's not right because we are the B in the LGBT. And you think
we're in there too.
But maybe sometimes it's kind of hard to get the hate from your own people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing. You know, like, is the free speech, the hate speech received within the communities, you know, by other people in the communities. You know, like, how do people go about like dealing with that? You know, I'm not bisexual. I am pansexual. But I am very well aware of some of the hate towards bisexual
It's insane.
people. Yeah, and
Crazy,
you know,
crazy people. Like, how can you hate on your own community? I don't understand.
yeah, they are real, and their feelings are valid, and they
Yeah,
are fledgling,
absolutely.
and they're also allowed to have golden retriever boyfriends, just even if they're bisexual. Like, it's allowed. It's fine.
I feel like I've missed something here, but okay, I agree. You do what you do, you babe. I'm happy with that. But like,
It's just one of those stereotypes we joke about on TikTok.
okay, cool. I am again old and I miss these things. But anyway, it's all good. But no, I absolutely agree with you. It's insane. How can you're fighting for the same rights? How can you be like, well, I'm allowed to have whatever I want. I'm allowed to go and have this cake and eat her too. You know, like I don't understand why he's always just caught up. But like like there's a rules to live by, and just don't be a dick. Like that's like it's the statement. Like, don't be a dick. Why would you want to inflict that pain and that opinion on this person when it's not going to change their life or their opinion or their lifestyle or
Their
anything
beliefs,
like
their
that?
sexuality, their race,
Oh,
their
it's exactly. It's not going to change
yeah.
it. If you have that opinion, keep it to yourself and just don't be a dick. Let them get on with their life and you can get on with yours, you know? Like, that is what I tell to no offense to the people in my life that are in fact these people, but the middle-aged white men, because let's be fair, quite a lot of problems come from them. But that's because they have had the privilege in the past. I'm just from my own opinion.
I know. This was
You're
the
like,
fact
oh God,
base.
what are
This
you
was no.
doing?
This
Shush.
was the True.
It is truth. And, you know, it is. Just don't be a dick.
Just don't be a dick. Ankit, anything to add to just don't be a dick?
Just don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
I think that's our main takeaway from this podcast today. Just don't be a dick. Tom, this is the part that you're gonna put in for Instagram.
This is the Insta
Just
part.
don't be a dick.
Let's just all do it together. Are you ready?
Just
After
don't be a dick.
three. After three. 1, 2, 3. Just
don't
be
be
a
a
dick.
dick.
That's what we're gonna talk. Great. Yeah, Ankit, do you have anything to add to the whole like balance and rights or anything like that? Anything you want to chat right there?
I feel like we covered a lot of it, but the other side of it is also understanding, because like a lot of what I see is people take things and claim it as hate speech when that isn't the intention. And a big section of that is stand-up comedy. And that's one thing that like I really dislike is I'm like, the stand-up comedian is making a joke. This is their profession. They're just cracking a joke. Like they don't mean, if they say that like elsewhere and like, you know, they tweet that and it's not meant as a joke and like they say something, by all means, fair. But like if they're doing a set, like stop taking things out of context and trying to claim something as hate speech when that isn't the intention of it as well. I think like that's another thing, like a lot of communities do it for various things, but it's just like also understand like there are certain situations where like, yeah, something might be said as a joke and it's like, you know, because it's a stereotype. Stereotypes come from somewhere. Right. And so they're making fun of the stereotype, but it stems from a little bit of truth. And it's like, you know, they're not being a dick. They're just also understanding like, all right, this is my profession. How do I get a laugh? Like, that's all they're trying to do. Stop canceling people for just trying to do their profession.
This whole cancel people, like you cannot judge somebody for something they've said 10 years ago when they're not that same person anymore either.
Oh, it
it's the same
pisses
thing.
me off.
Oh,
like
it's
nothing.
ridiculous. Like it's
That could
ridiculous.
be another podcast in itself as well, like cancel culture just in
I'm
general.
there.
For sure. Just on those points, this is just something I was thinking about just now, especially from what you were saying, Ankit. Like, what do we do about those people that just use the hate speech card for everything, you know? Especially, like, I think a lot of people are worried, especially older generation, white people, etc. A lot of people are worried about a lot of the things that they say just in case it gets, even though the intention is not there behind it, but I do find that there are a lot of people from marginalized communities now, not all of them, definitely not all of them, but there are those that will pull the race card or pull the queer card or for anything if they feel like even if they've not been offended, but they're like, oh, is it because I'm, you know?
Are we talking the snowflake culture here?
Yes.
Where you could be too sensitive.
Yeah, the going too far into the snowflake culture.
Now, please don't get me wrong, like
everything.
Yeah, everybody still deserves their rights. Everybody deserves to have their freedom of speech and things. But yes, there is that too much. But that's just from my opinion.
kind of
Sorry,
feel like
Alexandra, what are you saying? Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Ankit, you go and then Alexandra will go.
Sure. Okay. I kind of feel at least like right now, at least because like I also face this, right? And I'm like in my 20s. I'm from a marginalized community. Like I'm Indian American. Like it's not exactly like I come from, you know, white male middle class. But like I even face it where sometimes in group settings, I'm just like, it's just easier to stay quiet than voice my opinion because I've been in those situations where I've voiced an opinion and then it gets turned around and I'm the one getting yelled at. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? Right. So like, it's just like, it's turned into either like everyone just kind of keeps quiet and doesn't say anything, which is also unhealthy because then how are you supposed to have a conversation to help better understanding? But then the other thing that I've kind of like learned and kind of like seen is that like now with the snowflake community, once you kind of realize someone is just of that community, for me and like other friends that I have, we just don't care about their opinion anymore. We're like, you get offended over everything. So like, I just don't care about what you say anymore. So like, there's just no point in having a conversation with you. So like, that's kind of where I think it is. But like Lisa said, everyone still deserves their rights and like still deserves love, still deserves to be respected and everything. But again, like, I don't know where that fine line is. This is just what I've experienced.
Alexandra?
I feel like we just scratched the surface. The conversation just started really with that. Because yeah, intention versus impact is definitely it's a tricky one. I think, and it comes back to the empathy of realizing, oh, if I can recognize that this person's intentions are good, can I have the patience to hear them out, hear what they really have to say, and like I think as I've gotten older and getting into my 30s, I've realized I have been that person that has been really offended. And I've done some terrible things and said some terrible things, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I forgive those people because I see now how we're talking about good intentions. And it's a lot of that too is having, I think, the context of understanding added layers to it of like how we're talking about, oh, you know, older middle-aged white men. I've accepted kind of that there are I don't know to say it, that there's more to it. Like for example, people being neurodivergent, someone who has OCD, someone could be having an episode and they're having an anxiety attack about this word that triggered them. And I've accepted that just as that person is having, they're lost in their own feelings. So is the person that said that thing. They're also lost in their own feelings. I think, yeah, it's kind of just taking a breather. We all just take a breather.
Yeah, take a step back, you know, like come from a place of understanding. Like people come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, they feel different things. And you know, like taking a moment to be like, okay, well, is this person approaching me from a place of curiosity, or from a place of from adversity, or from a place of hate? You know, sometimes you can pick up on those social cues. Unfortunately, we are going to have to come to the end of the podcast there. We have run really far into it. We've had a wonderful conversation. I've really
I
enjoyed
feel there's
myself.
probably be a part 2 in this one, Zoe, because I can agree
Hey,
with
you never
Alexandra.
know.
We're just getting
Yeah,
started.
keep an eye on this space. To finish off with, do you guys have any parting words and anything you would like to plug while on this podcast? Lisa, we'll start with you, and I'll just go around my circle that I can see.
Yeah, in a little circle.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the invite. Genuinely, this has been a really wonderful conversation, guys. I've genuinely really loved hearing everybody's kind of opinions on this and having part of this conversation, because I don't get to do this very often. I'm unfortunately still studying, so I'm like very much like focused on that. So as for plugs, playing the Stonehaven Beer Festival on Friday. That's going to be good with a blues band. But my parting words are probably the same as this hashtag, we did earlier, which is just, yeah, don't be a dick. Like you were saying, Alexandra, we're all consumed by our own lives. We do not know what is happening in anybody else's lives. So just be kind, ask questions, be curious, and don't be a dick.
Ankit, parting words and plugs.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure every time. But this conversation, especially, like, it's opened my eyes to a couple things. So thank you all very much. Yeah, plugs wise, I have 2 podcasts. One is called Post Finale. It's about movies that I haven't watched before because somehow I'm an actor and I've seen nothing. And yeah, Lisa, that's most people's reaction. And the other one is called Flip the Scripts, and it's all about adaptations. So looking at original source material, usually it's books. Currently, we're talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated show, and then looking at the remake and the movie adaptation, or in Avatar's case, the Netflix live adaptation. So we're doing that. All of that can be found on our YouTube page, which is Co-op Forge, and it's just COOPFORGE.
Alexandra.
I'm so confused because I got so excited about Avatar. Oh my god. I'm gonna turn that in. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I've missed having conversations like this, so this was a good and I again, yeah, like I think try and figure out what a dick is so you can figure out how to and in terms of plugs, I am executive producing. I wrote and acted in a series, a mini series called Mark and Breakdown. So if you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, you find out more about us. That would be great. It's LGBTQ. It's women, two best friends who have a friendship breakup, and you follow them as they find out the secrets that led to their friendship. And so yeah, it's Bark and Breakdown, and that's on all platforms. BARK and Breakdown.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. As from plugs for coming from Carpet Crash Productions, we have Diva, the musical, on the 15th and 16th of June, and Queer Cabaret on the 20th, both taking place in the Arches in Putney. And keep checking at Car Crash Productions on all social media platforms for all your Pride goodness during the month of June. We've had a wonderful time with you today. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day and just don't be a dick. Bye.